gravitationally completely collapsed object. Well, after you've used the phrase a gravitationally completely collapsed object 10 times, you conclude you've got to get a better name. So that's when I switched to the word black hole.
The word black hole, which John Wheeler coined, suddenly caught on. Everybody adopted it. And from then on, people around the world, in Moscow, in America, in England and elsewhere, could know they were speaking about the same thing. And not only that, but it suddenly, the whole range of concepts got through to the general public, and even science fiction writers all of a sudden could talk about it.
Tonight, my friends, we stand on the brink of a feat unparalleled in space exploration. If the data on my returning probe ship matches my computerized calculations, I will travel where no man has dared to go.
Into the black hole?
In, through, and beyond.
Why, that's crazy. Ha! Impossible.
As a massive star contracts, its gravity becomes so strong that light can no longer escape. The region from which nothing can escape is called a black hole, and its boundary is called the event horizon. One might say of the event horizon what Dante said of the entrance to hell. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
I was once asked to actually be an adjudicator on an essay of which the subject was how to fall through a black hole and live. Now, the problem I had was that I wouldn't know how to give out the prize, because if I said, well, that looks like a good essay, the only real way of showing that this was right was to actually follow it, to do the experiment and fall in. But then, having fallen in, I would assume taking the person who wrote the essay with you, the question would be, how do you tell the rest of the world? Do you take the prize in with you that you give to them? And what do they do with it when they get to the center?
Believe me, I've been waiting a long time for someone like you to record this moment.
Thank you, Doctor.
Then I'm ready. Ready to embark on man's greatest journey.
Certainly his riskiest.
The risk is incidental compared to the possibility to possess the great truth of the unknown. There, long-cherished laws of nature simply do not apply. They vanish.
And life?
Life? Life forever.
If you were watching an astronaut foolhardy enough to jump into a black hole at some time on his watch, say 12 o'clock, he would cross the event horizon and enter the black hole. But no matter how long you waited, you would never see the astronaut's watch reach 12 o'clock. Instead, each second on the watch would appear to take longer and longer, until the last second before midnight would take forever. Thus, by jumping into a black hole, one could ensure that one's image lasted forever. But the picture would fade very rapidly and grow so dim that no one could see it.
As somebody disappears into a black hole, as seen from the outside, it looks as though time actually slows down, and the person becomes who's moving, at least he's thinking, he's moving, he's perhaps talking in his spaceship at a normal rate, seems to slow down and ends up by being frozen in a particular position, as seen by somebody watching him from the outside. And as seen from the outside, you never see what happens after that.
The astronaut wouldn't notice anything special when his watch reached midnight, and he crossed the event horizon into the black hole. Until, of course, he approached the singularity and was crushed into spaghetti.
One can fall through this event horizon without feeling anything, without noticing it. After about a week of falling, one begins to feel the pinch, and one extends longer and longer and gets slightly thinner. And, of course, one begins to get squeezed, until one gets very long and very thin and rather nasty. By the end of 2 weeks, one's fallen right into the center, and one is, of course, dead.
Before you lose sight of the outer world, you would see things happening, and you would see them at a greater rate, so that it would look like a firework display. The frustration would be that although you would be able to see everything that happens in the future, it would be going so fast that from a scientific point of view, you would have no time to analyze it. You wouldn't be able to take it in. And eventually, things would be going off so fast, and it would be so explosive that you yourself would be destroyed by the explosion, and that would be the end. But it would be a very exciting way to end one's life. It would be the way I would choose if I had the choice.
In the long history of the universe, many stars must have burned up their nuclear fuel and collapsed in on themselves. The number of black holes may be greater than the number of visible stars, which totals about 100,000 million in our galaxy alone. We also have evidence that there is a very large black hole at the center of our own galaxy.
Friends ask me, well, if a black hole is black, how can you see it? And I say, have you ever been to a ball? Have you ever watched the young men dressed in their black evening tuxedos and the girls in their white dresses whirling around, held in each other's arms, and the lights turned low, and all you can see is the girls? Well, the girl is the ordinary star, and the boy is the black hole. You can't see the black hole any more than you can see the boy, but the girl going around gives you convincing evidence there must be something there holding her in orbit.
One evening, shortly after the birth of my daughter, Lucy, I started to think about black holes as I was getting into bed. My disability makes this rather a slow process, so I had plenty of time. Suddenly, I realized that the area of the event horizon must always increase with time. The increase in the area of the event horizon was very reminiscent of a quantity called entropy, which measures the degree of disorder of a system. It is a matter of common experience that disorder tends to increase with time if things are left to themselves.
Jacob Bekenstein came into the office one day. Jacob, I said, it always troubles me when I put a hot teacup next to a cold teacup. I've increased, by letting heat flow from one to the other, the amount of disorder in the universe. But Jacob, if a black hole swims by and I drop both teacups into this, I've concealed the evidence of my crime, have I not? Bekenstein's a man of great integrity, and he looked troubled, and he came back to me later, and he said, no, you have not concealed the evidence of your crime. The black hole records what's happened to you. Stephen Hawking read the paper in which Bekenstein announced this result, thought it was preposterous, and decided to prove it was wrong.
My discoveries led Jacob Bekenstein to suggest that the area of the event horizon actually was the entropy of a black hole. But there was one fatal flaw in Bekenstein's idea. If black holes have an entropy, they ought to have a temperature. And if they have a temperature, they ought to give off radiation. But how could they give off radiation if nothing can escape from a black hole? As it turned out, Bekenstein was basically correct, though in a manner far more surprising than he, or anyone else, had expected.
As he gradually lost the use of his hands, he had to start developing, carefully choosing research projects that could be tackled and solved through geometrical arguments that he could do pictorially in his head. And he developed a very powerful set of tools that nobody else really had. So in some sense, when you lose one set of tools, you may develop other tools, but the new tools are amenable to different kinds of problems than the old tools. And if you're the only master in the world of these new tools, that means certain kinds of problems you can solve and nobody else can.
My work up to 1973 was in general relativity and was summarized in a book I wrote with George Ellis called The Large-Scale Structure of Space-Time. Even then, it was difficult for me to write things down. So I tended to think in pictures and diagrams that I could visualize in my head.
I remember visiting Stephen and Jane at their home in Cambridge. After supper in the evening, when it was time for Stephen to go to bed, Jane insisted, and Stephen acquiesced, I guess this was standard, that Stephen make his way up. I've forgotten whether it was one flight of stairs or two flights of stairs alone, and this was a period when he could no longer walk. The way he got up the stairs was he grabbed hold of the pillars that support the banister and pulled himself up the stairs with the strength of his own arms, dragging himself up from the ground floor on up to the second story in a long, arduous effort. Jane explained that this was an important part of his physical therapy to maintain his coordination and strength as long as possible. At first, it was sort of heart-rending to watch what appeared to be the agony of pulling himself up the stairs until I understood. It's just part of life, pulling himself up the stairs like that.
General relativity is what is called a classical theory. It predicts a single definite path for each particle. But according to quantum mechanics, there is an element of chance or uncertainty. A particle does not have just a single path through space and time. Instead, there is an uncertainty principle, according to which both the exact position and velocity of a particle can never be known. I began investigating the effect quantum mechanics might have on particles near a black hole. I found that particles could escape from a black hole, that black holes are not completely black. At first I didn't believe it. But when I redid the calculations, I couldn't get the effect to go away.
I met Martin Rees, and he was shaking with excitement. And he said, "Have you heard? Have you heard what Stephen has discovered? Everything is different. Everything has changed."
I was still unsure of my discovery, so I only told a few colleagues.